God bless you. You sound great tonight. You may be seated. I want to talk to you today about not letting people label you. Throughout life, people are constantly telling us what we can or cannot become, what we do or don't have. It's just like they're sticking a label on us. Too short, too slow, too old, too many mistakes, not talented enough. Most of the time, these labels are not what God says about us. But if we don't know any better, we'll wear them like they're the truth. And the sad thing is, if we keep them on long enough, they'll become so ingrained in our thinking that we'll become what people have said rather than what God has said. Albert Einstein's teacher told Einstein's father, no matter what Albert does, he'll never be successful. Friends, people don't determine our destiny, God does. I know a gentleman that was told by his high school counselor that he was not that talented and he should focus on the lowest skilled job he could find. What happened? That counselor stuck a label on him. Below average, barely get by, not talented. He didn't know any better. He wore the label year after year. In his thinking, I'm not that smart. I just don't have what it takes. He got a job at the local factory and stayed at the lowest level year after year. One day the factory closed and he went across town and applied at another factory. This company had a policy that every applicant had to take an IQ test. He took the test and his IQ came back at the genius level. The owner called him in and said, "What are you doing applying for this low-level position? You've scored the highest of anyone in our company's 63-year history." That day, a stronghold was broken in his mind. That day, he removed a label that had held him back for 17 years. He eventually started his own company and even went on to invent several products that are now patented and in the marketplace. And some of you, just like him, if you're going to rise to the next level, if you're going to become everything God's created you to be, you've got to remove a label that's holding you back. Somebody has convinced you that you've reached your limits, gone as far as you can go, or you've made too many mistakes. You're all washed up. You'll never accomplish your dreams. You just don't have the resources. No, people don't determine our destiny. God does. When I was growing up, I was very small. I grew 6 inches after high school. When I played basketball, at one point, I was practically a foot shorter than my teammates. And somehow, I got the nickname Peanut. Everywhere I went, that's all I heard. "Hey, Peanut. Good morning, Peanut." During the basketball games, in front of the whole high school class, "Go, Peanut, go." The cheerleaders, "Big G, little O, go, go." I was the little O. And no one said it derogatorily, they just said it in fun. But I have to tell you, it didn't help my self-esteem. Every time I heard it, it reminded me of what I was not. I'm not as tall as everybody else. I'm below average. I'm not up to par. And I let that label stick, and I became less and less outgoing, more quiet, more reserved, all because of a label that I allowed other people to put on me. One day I did what I'm asking you to do. I took that label off. I realized when God made me, He didn't make a mistake. He made me like I am on purpose. Now, I may be small, but I know dynamite comes in small packages. In the same way, you are not too tall, too short, too old, too young. God says you are a masterpiece. Now put your shoulders back, hold your head up high, and wear that label proudly, child of the Most High God. Today, in our schools, there's a lot of bullying. I had a parent tell me recently how her 10-year-old son was being teased because he's a very eager learner. He's always reading books and taking extra classes. And even at recess, when the other kids are out playing, he'll go over to a table and work on his math. And they're constantly giving him a hard time and calling him different names. Listen, students, young people, when you work hard, you study, you make good grades, you stay on the high road, people may call you stiff, nerd, geek, bookworm, but don't worry about it. In a few years, they'll call you boss. They won't be talking about you, they'll be working for you. Now, don't let their label keep you from becoming all God's created you to be. Most of the time, the reason people say hurtful, critical things is simply because they are jealous of who you are. Let me make it real clear. Most of the time, the reason you have haters is because down deep, they want to become just like you. But the problem is, they've allowed their own heart to become polluted. And since God won't let them rise to your level, the only way they can justify not being where you are is to try to find fault and criticize. They think if they can push you down and make you look smaller, it'll make them look bigger, and they won't feel so badly about themselves. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your permission." They may call you names, try to make you look small, but you don't have to wear their labels. Now, I've learned you are not what people call you, you are what you answer to. They can call you dumb and old and fat and loser and failure. Don't answer to that. That's not who you are. Just keep moving forward, being your best each day, doing great things in life. You don't have to let their labels stick. Every once in a while, my children and I will make chocolate chip cookies. The instructions tell you to grease the pan so the cookies won't stick. We use a product called Pam, and you spray it on the pan and it keeps the cookies from sticking. In the same way, when you keep your mind focused on what God says about you, you go through the day dwelling on the fact that I can do all things through Christ. I am strong in the Lord. Favor surrounds me like a shield. Goodness and mercy are following me. When you meditate on that, it's just like you're spraying Pam all over you. Nothing else can stick. Somebody tells you, well, you're too tall, you're too short. It slides right off. No. I know I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm one of a kind. That's the label I'm choosing to wear. Well, it looks like that problem is never going to turn around. Looks like it's permanent. No, I know this too shall pass. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers me out of them all. When you think thoughts like that, what God says about you, those wrong labels will not be able to stick. This is what my father did. He went through a great disappointment. Early in life, when he was a young man, he got married. It wasn't a good choice, and the marriage didn't last. My father was devastated. He thought his days of ministry were over, didn't think he'd ever have a family again. He resigned his church, got out of the ministry, and started selling insurance. It was the lowest point of his life. And unfortunately, the people around him were not very merciful. They told him he was not welcome in their church anymore. He had his chance, but he blew it. They stuck the label on him, failure, not usable, washed up. See, sometimes when you're down, people will try to keep you down. They'll remind you of all the reasons why you're never going to be what you could have been. But don't believe those lies. God knew every mistake you would ever make, and He has already arranged a comeback. But now you got to do your part. You cannot sit around in self-pity, wearing these wrong labels, thinking you're washed up. You got to sit on the sidelines of life. That's what my father did. For several years, he believed those lies and lived defeated, depressed, no passion for life. One day, he realized what I'm telling you, that people don't determine our destiny, God does. We don't have to wear the labels that they try to stick on us. And don't get me wrong, I am not for divorce, but I am for divorced people. And you may have gone through some setbacks, some failures, you may have made some poor choices, but know this, God is a God of another chance. His mercy is from everlasting to everlasting. His calling will never leave your life. Jesus came to lift the fallen, to restore the broken, to heal the hurting. But some of you are still wearing those old labels, guilt, condemnation, washed up, not usable. God has some new labels for you tonight. Will you dare wear them? The label God has for you says, forgiven, restored, new beginning, beauty for ashes, joy for mourning. My father began to let these new labels stick. One day he met my mother. They got married, eventually had 5 children. My father got back in the ministry and went on to pastor churches for over 50 years. Was married to my mother for nearly 47 years. He saw God restore him in amazing ways and do great things with his life. God will do the same thing for you if you will simply wear the right labels.